And
we're
live! That was Ali. You're getting a look at him right there. Great intro. That's the first time I've seen somebody do the Doctor Who song a cappella on a YouTube. Maybe it's occurred in other places. Welcome to the show, everybody. Dr. Bart Andrews, and we are live. We all recovered from our NatCon experience, which was an amazing experience, and there were so many SPSMers at NatCon, and it was a magical experience. I wish Chris Maxwell would have been there. He was there at least on the YouTube for a bit, and he saw how wacky things were. I spent a lot of times saving people from April. April was cornering various Tony, you were there, not your head, Tony. April was cornering various people, and we had to kind of rein her in. But I am so excited about this show tonight. But I'm going to hold off on talking more about that. Got a lot to do tonight. I'm gonna hand it off to our tech support expert guru, all around good person. And definitely a huge Doctor Who fan, Tony Wood.
Hey Bart, how are you tonight? Thanks everybody for showing up for one more show. We got an interesting lineup tonight. I'm gonna not go on for too long, but go to suicidology.org and check out AAS. I'm the board chair of AAS. That's my shameless AAS conference plug for the week. I'm also the COO of Quantify. Let's see, ourdatahelps.org. Donate your data. Do it. Do it now.
Donate your data?
After the show. Watch the show and then donate your data.
Watch your show, donate the data.
Are you all right there? You don't look all right.
Thank you, Tony. We're going to go over to Chris Maxwell.
Hey, everybody. I'm Chris Maxwell. I work for a large national suicide prevention organization, and I help with some SPSM production stuff. I know just enough to be conversational about Doctor Who, so I feel a little bit like Amy Pond, and I'm just here for the ride.
That's it? That's all you got? I'm going to put you back on. You've got to have more than that.
What more do you want from me? Ourdatahelps.org.
You're no good to me. Okay, at this
point,
I'm
gonna one up Tony and say, donate your data while you're watching the show.
Agrees with that, and I think that maybe make false identities. Tony, do you want people to make up personalities for? No, he doesn't. Okay, and now Ali.
Hey everyone, I am Dr. Ali Matu, a alumnus of the show, and I'm a clinical psychologist here in New York. But last time I was on this show, we were talking about science fiction and how science fiction can help promote good mental health. One of the things that kept coming up over and over again was Doctor Who. A lot of Whovians out there, a lot of people wanted to talk about Doctor Who, and I'm not really the guy to do that, and I didn't really know as much about Doctor Who, but I knew someone who did and who does and who's here with us now, and that is Josue Cardona, who has, I would describe as a polymath, does a little bit of everything, has a background in bioengineering, has a background in mental health, has a background in technology, it runs the Geek Therapy website, geektherapy.com, but also now the Geek Therapy family of podcasts. I think there's 5 podcasts on the family, 4 or 5 podcasts. 5, you're at 5 now. So we are so happy to have Josue here on the show with us tonight. Welcome, Josue Cardona.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, everybody. Long time, first time. I don't know that I'm an expert in Doctor Who, but I am a fan. I do like Doctor Who a lot. So I am excited to talk to you guys. And Geek Therapy is kind of my passion project, and we do a lot of talking about mental health through geek culture. So essentially, like, what good can we do by combining geek culture and not only mental health, but education and all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
So Geek therapy, does that mean you're treating geeks or you're trying to get rid of geeky stuff? What does that mean, Josue?
That's an excellent question. Geek Therapy at this point, it's just a brand, but right, it's our logo is kind of like geek out, do good, you know. So it's feel good, do good with geek culture. Yeah, it's whatever you want it to mean.
Nice. And okay, so this is kind of personal for Josue and I because he's the guy who got me involved in Doctor Who. Josue, you remember that sales pitch you gave me?
When I shamed you into watching Doctor Who?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I gave you a list, kind of like an order to go through specific episodes that I thought you would like and would get you into the series. No, it worked.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, it totally worked. I'm wondering what it was that really appeals to you about the series, because this is one of the longest running science fiction series of all time, Doctor Who. It goes way back, and it's been rebooted, relaunched. What is it about Doctor Who that just appeals to you so much?
According to the Guinness Book of World Records, it is the most successful sci-fi series or sci-fi franchise of all time.
Wow.
Sorry, I put that out there. To me, actually, I started watching Torchwood first, and then I really liked Torchwood, and then I saw an episode where the Doctor showed up. It was all this crossover, and then I went back and watched Doctor Who, and I didn't like the Ninth Doctor very much. It took me 3 times to watch the first episode, and once I got to the second episode of that season, I was hooked, because they went from like this weird mannequin episode to traveling to essentially the end of the Earth, where there's just all these rich people watching the end of the Earth happen, and they paid tons of money for it. And I was like, wait, this is so good. This is so crazy. I want more, and I've been a huge fan ever since.
So there's a lot of Doctor Who fans watching, a lot of, I think, Whovians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the right
Yeah.
term? Like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's like Trekkies for Star Trek, Whovians for Doctor Who. I don't know what there is
Yeah.
for Star Wars. Star Wars people don't have a name.
I don't know.
But they're out there. But a lot of Whovians out there. But for people who might not be that familiar with Doctor Who, could you summarize the 50 plus years of Doctor Who in about 30 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So Doctor Who is a series about a guy named the Doctor,
Mhm.
who is technically an alien from a race called the Time Lords, and he travels through time, and he's usually where he needs to be to solve a problem. That's pretty much it.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
pretty good.
Thank you.
I think that was like less than 30 seconds.
That's pretty solid.
Yeah.
Do other folks here on the show, have you all watched Doctor Who?
Of course, huge Who fan.
Cool.
But we know Bart is a Who fan. Bart?
Bart, you're like an old timer for Doctor Who, right?
So Doctor Who hit St. Louis when I was 13. It was on PBS, right? That's how Tom Baker was the doctor that I grew up with. And so it's one of those things. It's like that doctor and that experience when I was 13, discovering Doctor Who was an incredible thing for me. The first episode I ever saw was the episode where he ends up on the spaceship, and it's the people are in like hibernation, and they have to unhibernate a few of them, and then they start getting killed, and they know what's killing them. And it was absolutely riveting. The stages were hokey as all get out, right? But there was something so compelling that I've been hooked ever since. So. And I think there's incredible drama in Doctor Who, and also it really reflects how times have changed. One of the things I want to talk about that's really interesting to me, looking at the list, and April found this list we were talking about of all the places that suicide occurs. And actually, there's quite a bit where suicide is referenced in Doctor Who. The thing that was very compelling to me is when you went through the episodes, there were only a few references to suicide pre the new Doctor. 2006, 2007. And then when you look at the episodes post 2007, 2008, there is a lot of suicide references in those shows. Interestingly enough, that's also when the economic crisis started in America, Canada, and in Great Britain. And when the suicide rate started spiking, certainly in the United States of America. So coincidence? What do you guys think?
I think the themes of science fiction in general have become pretty cerebral in our couple of decades here, and they've become awfully focused about theories of the mind and what consciousness is. And I think that leads to a natural conversation about mental health and about how, various people who have different sorts of conflicts and are aliens in their own bodies and might react to those kinds of things.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of science fiction from the 2000s sort of reflects a lot of the issues that we as a society are going through, and I think that was one of the really cool things about Doctor Who coming back. It is, Josue, when did it come back? It was in the mid 2000s,
2005. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think especially the Doctor that Christopher Eccleston. It seemed like he reflected a lot more of a darker Doctor, and a Doctor who was going through some stuff.
Well, and actually, like, he's literally came off of a war. Like, he had just come back from a war, and we don't get to see that war. But it's 2005. We're in the middle. There's stuff going on in the world that, you're right, it's very possibly a reflection of what was happening in the real world. Yeah.
Yeah, at Chris Coombs 88 is saying that he was very underappreciated, much darker and more subtle than people give him credit for.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah,
he did an awesome performance. I think the post cyberpunk doctors have all been colored a little bit by the entire cyberpunk genre. They couldn't have avoided it. When you look backward at the Doctors before cyberpunk, they have such a different take on technology that in many ways is much less complicated, but much more, I think it's much more blatantly hopeful in several ways, with the exception of the Daleks, of course.
The Daleks!
So one of the things that I think, as we talk about Doctor Who, there's all kinds of folks who are like, well, why are we talking about Doctor Who? What does Doctor Who have to do with suicide prevention? What does Doctor Who have to do with therapy and helping people? And I think one of the things that's really cool in looking at the work that you've done, I was so impressed with your story about how, I'm going to be really honest about this. A lot of behavioral health is so stick in the mud, very traditional, and doesn't really think in terms of what the folks that we're seeing and their culture and their environment and what their story is. And more, I'm really getting focused on storytelling as one of the things that we do in therapy. One of the ways that we change people's lives and they change their lives is how they change their story. I would love to hear from you how you got on this path, Josue, because I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, for me, it started with as a kid and as a teenager and as a young adult feeling just misunderstood, right? Like I couldn't connect with people. I felt like people didn't understand me, but I felt like I could express myself better through the stories that I consumed, through the stories that I liked. I felt like I could even express how I felt better by giving an example from a TV show or something that I was consuming. And then I would share that with someone who was familiar with the show, and then we could connect with that. And that sparked an entire way for, like, it was so influential in my way in working with clients, because I would always want to know, what are you into? What do you like? What is it that you enjoy? Tell me about that. And I feel like I could learn something from you about that. And there's different ways. I mean, over the years, I've done it in many different ways. I might use a story that I know touches a theme that person might be dealing with in their life as a way to get the conversation started. Or I'll have them bring to me, like, why is that your favorite story? And you'll find some really meaningful insights. I know that for me, Doctor Who is one of those stories where I see myself in the Doctor repeatedly, over and over again. And there have been moments of my life where I've been kind of stuck, and then I see an episode and I feel like I can see things clearly. It's like I'm seeing them from the third person and I understand them a little more clearly, and now I can move forward. And tons of people have that type of experience with all sorts of content. And something that I really like about any content that you use, I like to use the example of music, for example. Sometimes even you can take one line out of a song completely out of context, but at that moment when you heard it, it meant something to you, and it was very important. So that can be a panel in a comic book, it can be a scene in a movie or a TV show. It can be something very small, but to bring that into therapy, talk about that, or just into your support group can be can be incredible for treatment and for making progress.
So as you started doing this and started exploring this important part of people's lives, and I think one of the things that really happens is that particularly in intellectual communities and among academicians, and particularly this kind of entertainment gets minimized as being insignificant or not important, when in fact it's a really important part of people's lives, right? When you started exploring this and learning more about people and who they are outside of that therapy session, what are the things in their life that they use to tell their story or connect with? How did folks respond to that?
So clients responded very, very well. And other clinicians, it was funny, it was when I bring it up, it's like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Or, oh yeah, I do that all the time. And one of the reasons why I started the podcast was to talk to other people who did that. So in a way also, so I didn't feel like I was all alone, but it was also very validating, you know, oh, other people do it and they do it in very specific ways. Over the years, I mean, that's how I met Ali. That's how, because we have this appreciation of media and we know that it's meaningful to people. You know, if it's meaningful to our clients, then it matters. If it matters to them, it should matter to us. And there's a lot that we can learn from that. So there's never really been a lot of pushback other than the typical where, well, you know, where's the research to back it up? You know, and that hasn't happened yet, but it's happening now and it will continue to happen.
You know, Josue, I really got to say that this is one of the a really wonderful resource and community that you've created through your podcast. And I'm going to tweet out the link here in a moment so everyone can check out your podcast. But you really have created this community where there are other people involved in mental health who are using stories and using the things that people care about to better their work and better the interventions with the clients that they share. And I just want to salute you here on this, because a lot of people sometimes can be sort of me first, and you've always been, how do I lift up other people first? And that's just a wonderful gift that you've given this community.
You. I mean, there's so many people out there, and I want everybody to share their story, because I feel that also I've had people tell me, well, you know, like, define what geek therapy is or what this kind of treatment is, and I don't necessarily want to do that. I can tell you how I do it, but many different people do it in different ways, because there's just so much good work being done out there. It's really important, I think, to get that word out. And I'm not the first one to do it either. I have books here from the late 90s, early 2000s that talk about you know, watch a scene in a movie and talk about it in therapy. There are other people who've talked about using superheroes before I did. I have a great book by Lawrence Rubin that really inspired me, and other people have done things before me. So I'm kind of doing the now version of that, which is a podcast and a website and that type of thing, and social media. Yeah.
Okay, so this is really cool stuff, and it really gets at something that Irvin Yalom in his most recent book talked about, is that we need to understand the people we're working with as a whole person and understand them more about who they are in their life and what's important to them, rather than looking at them as a cluster of symptoms or a problem to be treated. And I think that one of the things that you're doing with this approach is you're humanizing them and respecting them. And that whole comment that you made about, if it's important to them, to us, it should be important to us, and I'm not sure we're always living up to that. And I think that you've sent a really good message. So I've got a couple of questions as we move forward. First, I stumbled upon seems a little. I was directed to the Geek Therapy website and loved it. There's so much cool stuff on there. How can people, Josue, connect with Geek Therapy?
Yeah, so go to geektherapy.com. We're at Geek Therapy on Twitter. On Facebook, we have a community group where we can way more close-knit, ask questions, post stuff, really good stuff going on there. So just Google Geek Therapy and you'll find us. And specifically, if you want to be involved, we also have, listen to the podcast, listen to the different shows, and then you'll see that we're constantly talking about a library. We're building a library of content kind of in the way that I told you. So maybe, we'll talk about an episode of Doctor Who now that I think is very relevant to suicide. That could be listed in the library under suicide to help people talk about it. And people can submit ideas there's a quick form there, and you can find all of that on geektherapy.com.
Very cool. Can you tell us a little bit about, because we hit on this a little bit, how Geek Therapy got started, and what you've accomplished, and where you're going.
Sure. So I was an intern at a mental health program it was an after-school mental health program for kids 6 to 11, and the previous supervisor had bought a Nintendo Wii. I saw that there was a Wii. I'm a big gamer. I love to play video games. I have lots of ideas about how to use that with kids of that age to do groups, even just do social skills activities. And my supervisor said, no, absolutely not. And I went home that night and I created a website just to show her that that's not the way to go. So I kept looking for articles and research that would back up my claim that we can use video games for good. We can use the things, my argument was really, we can use the things that the kids like to do good in their lives. And I felt that she was saying that she was somehow completely disregarding the fact that these kids liked and played video games and knew that. And that's what bothered me the most. So over the years, I've interviewed a lot of clinicians. I've interviewed teachers and people who are essentially just using some aspect of geek culture or fandom to help people out in some way. Everything from, again, clinicians who use it in their practice to there's this great organization, a woman who makes capes for kids who are sick. Because she wants to empower them while they're going through treatment. And those are just concepts from the stories that we love. And those kids, doesn't matter how small they are, they understand it. They see that cape, it has the letter of their name on it, and they look like they're full of energy all of a sudden. And so those are the things that really interest me. And so over the years, I've met a lot of people. I think we've got a great community going on, and I've been able to get a few of them together to make content also. And I found other people who are making content. So now we have this whole podcast network. I just got the pilot for the 6th show on the network today. So that's super exciting. It's going to deal with like geek culture and family, and I just love where other people are going with it. I just want to create an environment where people feel comfortable enough to have these conversations out in public, just like we're doing here.
What are some of the surprising things that you've discovered through making these podcasts?
Surprising things I've discovered. I guess just how I thought I was onto something very, very novel that no one had ever thought of before, and then discovering that a lot of people are thinking about it and doing it in different ways, just not talking about it publicly. So I think that's been the most surprising thing, that there's a lot of excitement about it, but not everybody is again going out and making content about it, which I think is really important today.
So one of the things that's really clear with this group here is that science fiction, fantasy, these stories are things that we've really connected with. It's inspired us in a lot of different ways. Josue, it inspired you to do this whole project, right? So, and we've hit on this a little bit, but what I'd love to hear from you guys is what sci-fi or fantasy show, what Doctor Who, Star Trek, I don't care what is something that really you connected with, that left an impact on you, that has kind of shaped you or been a special moment for you that around these types of stories?
Who's starting? I start. I'm
gonna go with Ali.
Oh, I was gonna do Star Trek before Ali.
No, we're gonna go. Okay.
Before Ali brings up Star Trek, I'll bring up Star Trek. Just because it was such an important thing for my family. It was a show that we sat around and watched when I was a kid, and if important themes came up, it was something that we would talk about, and I could ask my parents like, "What's going on?" and we could have really smart conversations about things that were going on in the world through this TV show. And now I want to hear what Ali says after I took his Star Trek.
You took my stuff, and you knew you were doing that. You did it on purpose, Josue.
I did.
Well, before I saw Star Trek, and that completely changed my life. There's also Star Wars, and the whole idea of the Force, I think, is so much about being present and being here and learning how to calm your mind and be one in the moment. There's all those famous scenes with Luke being trained on Dagobah from Empire Strikes Back, and he's so learning just to be present. And that idea really stuck with me and really resonated with me for a very long time.
Cool. Chris Maxwell.
Yeah, so I just love the concept of using sci-fi and using shows and content that people connect with to start these larger conversations. And I think for me, one of the biggest moments regarding sci-fi in my life was, I had this friend back in, I think it was 2009, whenever the new Tron came out. And both of us were huge original Tron fans. And so we had this like 2-week long texting conversation going on about like our gruesome concerns for the Tron legacy. And, we were picking apart the trailer and all this kind of stuff. And at some point he mentioned, he's like, man, I'm really worried about this. The Daft Punk score looks amazing, but I don't know if I'm going to be around to see the movie when it comes out. And I said, what are you talking about? And he called me and we talked for 45 minutes to an hour about how he was in the depths of a suicidal crisis. And it just blew up into this opportunity for us to talk about what was really going on with him, using sci-fi as a way to broach that conversation. And then we both, he made it through, and we both watched the new Tron. Like he lived out of town, so we're watching it and texting each other like the whole time. So it was touching, but it was just one example of how that community can create those conversations.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Chris.
And Chris, what you're mentioning here is also about how these stories can bring people together. And Josue, I know that's something you write a lot about, is just not only community, but how community is formed through these shared stories. Like you've talked about this with Comic Cons and that aspect of geek culture and how people like to geek out together and how important that is.
Particularly, I believe it's very healthy because usually these things are celebrations. We're not coming on together to badmouth a series or something like that. Like that's not what the conventions are. The conventions are people who are there to celebrate the things that they like. There's already positivity. You're coming into it with a positive attitude. So how can that not be good?
Not that there aren't hot debates about minutia.
That comes later. That happens in line.
But it's all in good fun, generally speaking. The spirit of it is very different than say American politics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So probably one of my most formative, most profound experience with science fiction was a book. How dare I bring up print? A Stranger in a Strange Land. Have we all read that? Ollie's read it.
Yeah.
Have you read it, Bart? It's a great book. Heinlein, there are a lot of challenges for Heinlein. He's a man of his time. So when you read his material, just remember when he wrote it, because he's a chauvinist and he's got a lot of issues that are very much a reflection of being a writer, of a white male writer in the 1940s and 50s. But the story and the characters are so well crafted, and it's a wonderful tour of intellect and, once again, the theory of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
I grok you on that, Tony. If you get that right, okay, you get it. Thank you, Tony.
Absolutely.
I'm glad that you got it. So for me, there's been so many different experiences in my relationship with science fiction, both visual and written, is very intense. But it's really interesting. Doctor Who makes me cry sometimes, particularly the newer Doctor Who's. The older Doctor Who's didn't have that as much of that emotional latency, and as the new ones do. There's a richness and a depth to the stories that's really incredible. There's one story in particular, and I'm just going to, spoiler alert, tough crap if you haven't watched these. Doctor Who has a wife, River, in the show, and they're living in opposite. One's going forward and one's going backwards. And there's this episode where she realizes that it's the first time she's met him, right? There's this weird thing, right? There's this really weird time, but there's this sadness and poignancy around that episode that always just completely floors me, and the actress does an amazing job. And it really gets at this whole idea that we all know we're gonna die, here's a little secret. Everybody you know is going to die. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Everybody on this panel at some point, we're all going to be dead. That's a cheery thought, right? But at the same time, we have to be able to enjoy the sweetness of life, right? And so that episode really kind of captured that both of these things are occurring for us at the same time. This incredible fear and panic about the fact that we're all going to die, and that life's also this incredible, amazing journey. And that both of these things, when we're aware, are happening at the same time to us. It was really powerful. And that episode really hits me. I've been remiss in not letting folks know Doc Foreman had a really crappy internet connection, so she is not with us on the show tonight, but she's watching closely. I can tell because I keep getting texts from her. Because I think is everybody here in this group is nodding, nod vigorously. You too, Josue, nod vigorously. Okay, excellent. So God bless you, sir. And so she points out that Doctor Who really reminds her of kind of a therapist and a psychologist, and that he steps in and he's got a different perspective, and he views things through a different lens and is able to see problems from a different angle. And that's one of the ways he's often able to kind of turn things around, is he's got this very unique perspective. And of course, as she points out, he's a doctor. That all kind of jives for those of us that are in the profession. There's some incredible parallels between what the doctor does and what we do on a regular basis. I think there's a great blog out there about Doctor Who, the social worker. Have you guys seen that? And I wish I had the link handy, but it's like the social work elements of Doctor Who, and they go through all these really cool things at Doctor Who that's very social worky, right? And I love that. So when you guys think about we're talking about Doctor Who, it can be Star Trek, because I know, is it Diana Troy from the new generation always impressed the hell out of me. That was very cool. What are the parallels?
The next generation. I'm going to have to correct you on that one before we get corrected by others.
Ouch.
Once
you're
again, the debate
Sally.
of minutia is very serious.
It's all love.
If you thought that language was a serious issue in mental health, you've not met the science fiction people. They mean it. They are not joking.
I'm just watching out for you, Bart. You know that.
Ali, you're on.
All right. So, there's a comment, Josue, that I wanted your take on. Amber, who is at AJ Can 36, said, "An alien in my own body. That makes sense to me as someone with BPD." And this made me think about the Doctor. He's someone who dies and regenerates, right? So are there some ideas here that about going through transitions, or things that you've noticed that's unique here about Doctor Who, or lessons that there are for us to take away with someone who does go through major transitions in their life?
Yeah, so I'll go to what Bart was saying first. And one of the things that was huge for me about Doctor Who is that the fact that he is the Doctor. That's supposedly his name, but that's not his name. It's a title that he chose. It's not a degree that he earned. It's anything like that. When it came time to pretty much pick a code name, he decided that he was going to be a doctor. So he was going to go and he was going to help people. And that's what he does. In terms of the regeneration and that type of thing, one of the moments that the character of the Doctor really helped me at one time was when I was dealing with my weight. I've had issues with food my whole life since I was a kid, and there was a particular point where my health wasn't doing well, and I needed to make a transition. I needed to make a change, and there's towards the end of the 10th Doctor's run, when he's about to regenerate, he does something that no other Doctor had done before, which is that he has an accident and he begins to die. And then he kind of talks to someone else or looks at the camera and he says, it's started. It's happening now. This process has begun. I am changing. And at that moment, when I heard that, right, it helped me realize, you know what, I'm not going to get well from one day to the next. It's actually a process. And seeing him go through his goodbyes, essentially go through all this, who knows how long it took him to go and visit all of his friends and do all these things before he finally regenerates, even though he knew that process had started. For me, in that moment, at least, it helped me understand, it's not overnight. It is a process, and it's something that I have to start doing. And it completely changed. It was exactly what I needed at that moment to help me remember, oh yeah, I need to get started so that I can reach my goal.
I think there's so much you said there that people who are struggling with mental health, or therapists, people who are family members and loved ones of anyone who might be struggling can take from that.
Again, like for me, it's been incredible. And I'm sure, I mean, a show doesn't go on for that long and become that popular without touching people's lives. So I'm sure that there's tons of stories like that. I've heard many of them. Yeah.
That's amazing. So, oh, go ahead.
No, well, I think that we're hitting some key issues here about how much this resonates in our lives. And we've also gotten the sense that, hearing from Amber about how not feeling connected with your own body or feeling connected with the world, and these stories help us feel connected, right? And when I look at my own journey and my fascination with science fiction, is because I didn't feel like I connected with the world. I always felt like I'd rather be in these worlds that I read about, right? I always felt more comfortable there. It was a safer space for me in a lot of different ways. So it's really interesting. Have we seen do you see threads or similarities in folks that are really attracted to this genre? What does it say about us? What does it say about us in general? Anybody?
I think it says we're really cool people. But I feel exactly the same way as you, Bart. I was attracted to science fiction and specifically Star Trek because I wanted to believe in that better future. And it also gave me a way of understanding things that are going on around me in a way that just brought things into more clarity than they would have through other stories. I think I think it does bring in some dreamers, but I also think it brings in people who are kind of interested in these issues.
I know for me, what brings me to science fiction is the big ideas, right? Like I love that, something that makes me think. That's why I love science fiction. And then in between those stories, in between those big moments of huge ideas and seeing the future and what if, there are people, and there are people going through stuff, and a lot of that stuff is relatable. And I think that we can connect to so many different stories. That's why, at least throughout my work, I've never exclusively looked at one particular fandom. I mean, if your North Star is a professional athlete's real life story, then let's go with that. I think that the stories that are happening are I don't know why they speak to different people, and they speak to people at different times also. So I mean, I know why I like science fiction, and I know why those moments that happen they're personal moments, right? Those moments of reflection aren't the big ideas. It's the very personal things that happen between, to a person or between two people.
Yeah, Josue, one of the things that you mentioned earlier about Doctor Who, when we were trying to figure out the mechanics behind it, and you said there are no rules, right? Like, I mean, even the regeneration process, they're like, well, we got to get a new one, so we're just gonna, well, let's make a plot point that makes this work. Well, that's freeing. The concept that I can participate in this narrative and be a part of it, but not have to be tied down by the stuff that causes me anxiety, that makes it really difficult to live every day. That doesn't exist in this universe. So there's a freeing quality too.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Things don't have to be this way. They can, not only with individuals and rules, but also society and culture. Things can be different in science fiction.
Yeah. I mean, is it okay if I talk about the episode? Well,
yes.
There's something that happened.
It's okay to talk about anything.
Josue, we got a lot of people asking about.
Wait, this is important. This is important. This is a safe space.
Thank you.
So a lot of people are asking about Vincent and the Doctor.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to mention, because so Vincent and the Doctor is my favorite episode of Doctor Who. I've seen it many, many times. It's an episode every time I see it I cry, Bart, so I feel you. It is my favorite for many different reasons. And actually, to Chris's point, one of the things that happened in that episode is, there are kind of these loose rules around time travel. You don't want to purposely change anything. And at the end of this episode, well, let me backtrack, right? The episode starts off with the doctor and Amy visiting a museum. They see an exhibit of Vincent van Gogh, and it's Amy's favorite artist. And they see something, they see a monster in a painting, so they go back to when he painted it so they can address the monster. But we learn from early on, the museum guide is talking about how that painting was completed in the last months of his life, right before he killed himself. So you already have suicide as a theme kind of looming over the episode. They go back in time, they fight the monster together, and there's so many great quotes from that episode. And essentially at the end, when they leave Vincent behind, right before they go, they kind of throw all the time travel rules out the window, and they bring Vincent with him to the future so he can see what a great artist he became, how prolific he became and how recognized he became. And they actually asked the museum guide what he thinks of Vincent. And with Vincent standing right there, the guide, played by Bill Nighy, he talks about how he was like not only just an amazing man, but one of the greatest artists who ever lived. And during Vincent's life, he never heard anyone say anything nice about his paintings. One of the things that happens throughout the episode, or one of the themes, is that he has no support whatsoever. He's mistreated, and he shows symptoms of a variety of different disorders, everything from bipolar symptoms to synesthesia. They address depression. He seems to have problems with alcohol. Like they only like touch on a lot of these things, but then he's completely alone. And he even tells the doctor, you're just another doctor. You people come and you never help me, and you leave, and then you leave me alone. And before the doctor leaves, he tells him that he's actually the first doctor who ever helped him. And that was after he was able to see his future. And I don't know, it's just such an amazing episode. And if are there any more questions about it? Because I took a lot of notes about this particular episode.
You got is that behind you a painting that's a reference to that episode?
Yeah, so technically it's a reference. It's painted by Van Gogh in the series, but it is technically from the Pandorica Opens, which is 2 episodes later, where Vincent reappears for just a scene. But yeah, it's because that's another thing. Like, people think that he's crazy, but actually he has visions, and he can see things that are invisible, and he's practically a superhero, but nobody understands that, and so they all think he's crazy, and he's completely misunderstood. So he's all alone. Yeah.
So it's interesting to me because the Pandorica Opens painting that you have behind you, I've got it on a T-shirt, right? And I love that T-shirt, and it's really interesting to me when I'm wearing that T-shirt. When you run into a Whovian, they lose their shit, right? As soon as they see it, they know what it is, and they will come up to you, right? And they're like, "That's Pandorica Opens," and it really it's one of the coolest things. I absolutely love that shirt. At an AAS conference, Jennifer Battle, who is awesome, by the way, who is sometimes on SPSM, her daughter runs up and she goes, "He's wearing Pandorica Opens," and it was just the coolest thing that there's this way that we identify with these things, and people take it very, very seriously, right?
So that painting was hanging in my lobby when I had my private practice, and when you open the door, that's the first thing you would see. And some clients got it immediately, and when they came in, they were very excited, and others, they couldn't see it. It wasn't a reference that they got. But oh yeah, made a huge difference when somebody walked into my office for the first time and they saw that, and they knew what it was.
So, Josue, could you tell me a little bit about that? Because I think we've all had this similar experience where you're walking around and maybe you were wearing a shirt or you've got a button or something like that, and then people see that and there's oh my gosh, this thing, like, what do you think it is about that, these little symbols that we have, that is this like a connecting with community or something like that?
Yeah, I think it goes down to, having something in common, feeling that somebody understands something about you, like, oh, you like that thing that I like.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people don't have that, I mean, now I try not to take it for granted, but I know that I kind of do, because I've been able to just be a part of so many different communities and kind of actually start to create them, right? If I go somewhere and there's something that I like, I'll try to kind of wave that flag and hope that other people see it. But there was a big part of my life where that wasn't the case. And I know tons of people where that is not the case. You know, working a lot with kids, one of the things that came up over and over again was, you know, my parents don't get me. My parents don't like anything that I like. And whenever I would show interest, just the slightest interest, just ask a question like, oh, what is that? Oh, do you like that thing? That sometimes was, you could tell that they had rarely ever seen that. And that was a thing that I saw over and over with my clients. And I think that, you know, whether you're seeking services or not, that's something that feels good, you know, to have something in common. Doesn't matter what we look like or what else we're doing, to have something that we can talk about, that we can celebrate together. It just feels fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's something I personally experience.
Yeah, it's validating too. Yeah, absolutely.
Validating, and it gives authority to your connection with the community, with whatever the piece is. And so you can simultaneously say, no, we get, it's like an inside joke, we get this, people, and we can talk about things on a different level that other people just won't.
Yeah, and suddenly you're not the only one. And, oh man, that makes such a difference, because so many people feel like I'm the only one who thinks this, or I'm the only one that likes this. I don't know anybody else who feels that way. And like you said, it's so validating to be like, there's somebody else in the world like me.
So I don't think, Josue, I don't know if I told you this before, but my oldest friend, his name is Lowen, and I've known him since 4th grade. And it wasn't until 12th grade, a week before graduating from high school, that we both realized we're big sci-fi geeks and we're big Trekkies and we're really both into like comic books and all this stuff, because we just never talked about it around each other. And it makes me so sad to think about all the years of geeking out that we missed out on. But so many of us think, oh, it's just me. Either I'm the only one who likes this stuff, or I'm the only one struggling with this stuff, because we don't really wear it, we don't show it. And so like that t-shirt or that painting makes it just a little bit easier to say, hey, it's okay, me too, I got that, and I'm interested in that too.
Yeah.
Someone here was just mentioning, forgive me, I can't find the tweet, but someone was mentioning how many friends they've made from opening night screenings of movies, because you know that the other people here are really into it too. Yeah. So there's so much to say here about a community that exists, and how can we help people to get more in contact with each other.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a richness in this content and the concepts we're talking about. One of the things is, as we're all talking about this, that's hitting me, is that there's no doubt that those of us that are really attracted, particularly to especially for Doctor Who, but I think Star Trek as well, is that we feel like outsiders, right? And there's something about Doctor Who that definitely, in Star Trek, that definitely make us feel like we belong more, that we're more connected. The other thing about this that's really interesting, a lot of the things that everybody, the population, like football or baseball or music, there's nothing particularly personal about liking pop music or liking football, right? But when you disclose that you like Doctor Who or Star Trek, that you're passionate about it, you've really revealed something very specific and vulnerable about yourself, that I same as when we disclose that we like other things. Like saying I like birthdays or cake or ice cream isn't particularly personal. Saying you like Doctor Who, you're taking a chance with that, right? That because our affinity for it's a very personal connection. And when somebody else says, yeah, I do, you know something about them at a much deeper level than these other things, right? And I think that's one of the things that's really attractive about it. And so as we get at that, there's no doubt that folks that are struggling anxiety with thoughts of suicide are feeling disconnected, right? Yeah. There's a strong sense of disconnect, and these are things that help us feel connected. And I think one of the things that's amazing, Josue, is that you found this way to enhance that connection and use these personal connections to help people process and connect with you. So as we move forward, how would you recommend that folks do this? If a therapist, a clinician, a social worker, a case manager, a peer wanted to do this sort of thing, what would you recommend?
So I say start with viewing the client as not just a whole bunch of symptoms, right? think about what they like, think about what they're into, and possibly include that in your intake process. You know, get to know people. I believe that you can get to know people better by the things that they care about, by the things that they like, by the things that they geek out about, than any other thing possible, you know? So start there, and that will open lots of different avenues.
What's the number one question you want therapists, mental health professionals, social workers to ask when they're meeting someone?
Yeah, what are you into? What do you like? What's your favorite TV show? You don't watch TV? Do you play video games? You know, how do you spend your free time? What do you like to do?
That sounds so simple.
It is so simple. Yeah. You know, and a second part of that is like, look at their face when they're answering that question. You know, have them go through those things. Their eyes will open up wide. You know, they will stand up straight. They will lean forward. You can see how much they care about something, how excited they get about something. And that sometimes says more than the words coming out of their mouth. And go with that. Ask them why they like that. Ask them if they share that with a family member or with a friend. Ask them, you know, plus it's so much more fun to just talk about the things that you like, you know.
So you mentioned video games, and there's been a few comments on Twitter about video games as well. A lot of people are hungry to talk about this. I mean, do you have any video games that have really resonated with you in a similar way as Doctor Who and some of the themes you're talking about?
It depends, right? I've made friendships through games. I keep in contact with some of my friends through video games only. I have great memories, my earliest memories, and some of my favorite memories with my mom are playing video games when we were a kid. You know, because we connected over that. You know, there's so many different things. In particular, I've had great experience playing, just letting a kid choose a game that they really like. Or an adult too. I mean, it doesn't matter. I would have a console in my office. I would make sure I had staples like Minecraft, for example, right? Or I'd have somebody. Now it's so great because I would have clients of all ages show me their clips, because it's so easy to record a scene from a video game, or show me a picture of something that they did. Just bringing it into the conversation however you want. There's so many different ways to do that now. And it can just be verbal, but it could also be, you know, show me exactly what it is that you did. Show me your favorite part of that game. And again, just even if that doesn't lead to some incredible insight, it can, but if it doesn't, it's still see what effect it has to just ask someone about the things that they care about, and see how that helps with rapport, see how that helps with you know, just how supported the person feels.
Well, now how do you deal with I think this is true of Doctor Who, where you can binge a lot of episodes. Like there's over 50 years of episodes, and with video games too, it can sort of take a lot of time away from what you're trying to do. So how do you help people with this stuff to make sure it's helping them and not hurting them?
Well, it depends. I mean, every case, you know, as long as it's not interfering with other things. I mean, if you're retired and you're on disability and you have 12 hours to play every day and you're still eating your 3 meals, you're still resting, you're still sleeping, you know, I mean, I don't know. It's not necessarily interfering with the things that you need to do, but if you're, as long as your kids are fed, et cetera, you know, I mean, and I've heard all sorts of cases, you know, people who were deployed who really needed to take some time off and they could only play 2 hours, you know, and that was their only free time, but it was what they needed as rest, you know, as a way to separate and recharge their batteries from what they were seeing. So, I mean, it's a case-by-case basis, but usually the way we look at this is just to make sure that the things that are essential to your life, your family, your kids, your job, your school, your hygiene, your health, as long as all of those things are taken care of, whether you're binge watching Netflix or playing video games or reading a book, if you're using your free time to do any of those things, you know, you can have a conversation about that, but it's not intrinsically a bad thing.
So there's so much power in this, and one of the things that I know this is something Chris might talk about, but I'm always stunned that in 2017 that therapists that work with youth and adolescents that we don't have video games that are completely designed for therapy, and that in fact when you come into therapy that we're not doing video games with kids in therapy, right? That, I mean, we have such the opportunity to have these powerful impacts. We could use games as a way to treat, and it's amazing to me that as long as video games have been around, that there's a few examples of this, but most people have, and so that's just fascinating. There's this huge opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, a TV show about their design for therapy, or a comic book about therapy, or a game that is a therapy game is still therapy, you know, and clients see through that. I think kind of the special part of bringing in something that's very personal to them. You know, nobody's playing the therapy game at home for fun. And so there's, you know, there's a conversation to be had, but absolutely, like, there's different ways to integrate it, and there are different aspects of game design that you can integrate into treatment that are, that, I mean, are pretty exciting, and some people do use them, and there are models out there, and it's, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, when we were, so we did a panel. I did a panel with Desiree Stage and Bo Pinkham and David Walensky at South by Southwest a few weeks ago about suicide prevention in video games. And afterwards, a woman actually came up and talked about how she's starting a group therapy program specifically designed around playing video games. And it's like elementary age and up into middle school, extracurricular right after, like, it's at the school, there are educators involved, they all know about the program. So and she was telling me about this, and I'm just, it's blowing my mind. I'm like, why is this not more widespread? Why doesn't every single school have a program like this? But you said there's models out there that do this?
Yeah. I think that you can take a lot from the educational technology world, right, and bring those things into psychoeducational work and social skills work, right? And there's a lot that you can do with behavior modification, right? There's right, mental health is very broad. There's so many different things that you can do, and there are people who use video games in different ways. I know that there's someone who has a clinical Minecraft server set up, right, to have essentially groups inside a Minecraft server for a group of kids, you know. So there are people trying things out, and just again, those stories, I love to hear those stories. That always, I wish I could collect all of them and put them together so that we could all learn from each other. And you know, every day I learn new stuff, and it's great that people are. It's great to see that people are working in places or have supervisors that are willing to allow them the flexibility to try things out and see how it goes. Plus, I mean, play therapy is not a new thing, right? There are lots of things within play therapy that we can simply adapt video games into.
That is so cool. And believe it or not, guys, we're almost out of time. I mean, I can't believe how quickly that went by. No. So it's time for thoughts. So April wants to say, April's sending commands in through to me to explain that. What is it, April? Oh, let me read April's text so that we get this right. Explain the therapy game for the non-expert audience.
So there are board games, and there are like the Talking, Feeling, Doing game is one. It's very popular. I've played Emotional Bingo. You know, when I say the therapy game, I use that as a general term for games that have attempted to do this kind of thing in the past. If you go to biofeedback or neurofeedback, they have games that they use as part of those treatments. So again, those aren't really games. They're kind of interactive things that try to simulate games. And that's what I meant by therapy game. There's a lot of stuff out there that is not, it's just not fun for anybody.
Thank you.
Or for you.
That means that we all won't get severe spankings at the end of the show. So you saved our bottoms on that one, sir. So it's time for final thoughts. We're going to do them in this order, and we got to be brief. So keep it tight. Hey, Chris, Allie, that's the order we're going to go. And Tony, go.
If there's one central theme to Doctor Who, it is the power of an individual to change things.
That's really good. That's hard to top too. I think one of the things that the Doctor has taught me is he has a lot of weaknesses, he has a lot of strengths, but he always has a companion. and he always works with other people to produce change. So the idea for me is, who are the companions in our life, and how can we get in better contact with them? And yeah, and also sonic screwdrivers and fish sticks and bow ties are cool.
Excellent.
I'm gonna run with a thought that I had earlier, or that Josue had earlier, about the rules and not limiting ourselves. And what I would say is, just live your life like a Doctor Who episode, where you're not limiting yourself to the things that bring you down. We can overcome those things and just live your life like you don't have, as if you don't have any rules that you need to follow.
And I guess I'll wrap up with a quote from my favorite episode of Doctor Who. Kind of one of the last things that happens after the Doctor and the companion come back, and they realize that they tried to help. They did a lot of good for Vincent, and Amy is kind of disappointed, and she says, we didn't make a difference at all. And the Doctor comes back and says, I wouldn't say that. The way I see it, every life is a pile of good things and bad things. The good things don't always soften the bad things, but vice versa. The bad things don't necessarily spoil the good things or make them unimportant. And I feel that we definitely added to his pile of good things. So go out there, add to the pile of good things for everybody.
Beautiful final comments. My final comment would be, and I really do believe this, I think our fiction tells us more about the truth of being human and what's important to human beings than all of the nonfiction that's out there. These stories really get at what it is to be human. And I think Doctor Who does an amazing job of what it means to be a human being, particularly in the modern world. And I really appreciate you guys being along on this particular trip on the TARDIS. Survived another. Yeah, that went over like wow. All right, you guys, everybody survived another show on SPSM. Love you all. We'll be back next week, and I'm hoping April's. We apparently need to have a quota of women on the show. Good night, everybody.
Bye.